Welcome back to Inside the Philippines Journals, the channel where men who crossed an ocean for a second life tell you the truth about what they found. Not the postcard. The truth. If you're new here, this is where we sit down with the ones who actually did it. The ones who sold the house, packed the bag, and got on the plane. And we let them talk, uninterrupted, about what it cost them. Today's man is called Michel. He's 51, French, and for more than 20 years he was a soldier. A career man in the French army. The kind who plans a thing 3 times before he touches it. Then the uniform came off. A civilian job folded under him, and he found himself standing in the middle of his own life with no unit, no mission, and a house he no longer wanted to live in. So he did what a lot of men do. He looked east. He looked at the Philippines. Now, here's what I'll tell you, and no more. Michel is not here to tell you he was ruined. He isn't. In some ways, he's one of the few who got it right. But the title of his story is a warning, and he means it as a warning. And by the end you'll understand why a man who came out the other side in one piece would sit here and tell you, plainly, not to do what he did, unless you do it exactly the way he did. There were nights he nearly threw all his discipline out the window for a woman and a plot of land. He'll tell you about those nights too. Before we start, do me a favor. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. If you've lived this, or you're thinking about living it, share it below, because someone reading needs to hear it. And if these stories mean anything to you, like the video and subscribe, so we can keep bringing them to you. Here's his story, in his own words. I counted rations for 22 years. That is the thing you have to understand about me before anything else. In the army, you learn that a plan is only worth what it weighs when reality pushes back on it. And you learn to count fuel, to count kilometers, to count the men on the truck twice, because once is how you lose one. When I left, the counting did not leave me. I still do it. I did it with this whole affair, and that is the only reason I am sitting here whole and not broken like the men I met over there. But let me go back. Let me start where it broke. I did my 20 years, I took my pension, and like a fool I thought I would be bored, so I took a civilian job. Logistics. Moving pallets and paperwork for a firm near Lyon. It was fine. It was, how do you say, beige. And then in the space of one autumn the firm was bought and gutted, and the department I ran was folded into a spreadsheet in another country, and they thanked me and gave me an envelope. And that was that. 50 years old. No wife. She had left long before. No drama. We simply became 2 strangers who shared a kitchen until we didn't. No children. No unit. The army had been my family for half my life, and now I had a flat that was too quiet, and a pension that came every month, whether I got out of bed or not. You have to understand what the army is to a man like me, or none of the rest makes sense. It is not a job. A job you leave at the door. The army is the door, and the room, and the men in the room, and the reason to get up while it is still dark. For 22 years I always knew where I was meant to be at 6 in the morning, and who was depending on me to be there. Take that away, and a man does not become free. He becomes weightless, which is a different thing, and worse. I would stand in the kitchen at 7 with a coffee going cold, and not one soul on this earth who needed me to have made it. You can be surrounded by nothing and still feel it pressing on you from all sides. The redundancy itself I did not even take personally, and that surprised me. They were not cruel. A man from the parent company, younger than my youngest sergeant had ever been, explained the synergies to me in a meeting room with a whiteboard. and I understood every word, and I signed where he pointed. It was clean, it was correct. That was the horror of it, almost. That a life could be closed down so correctly, with a firm handshake and a good reference, and nobody in the wrong. I sold the house, my parents' old house near Grenoble, that I had been keeping for no reason I could name. I did not live in it. I could not sell it. It just sat there, full of their furniture and my childhood, gathering a dust I drove out twice a year to disturb. It sold faster than I expected. After the taxes and the agent, I had something close to 155,000 euros in the bank. Call it nearly 10 million pesos, though I did not think in pesos yet. And a soldier's pension, a little under 1,500 euros a month, arriving like clockwork. On paper I was fine. In my chest, I was nothing. You want to know how a disciplined man ends up on a dating website? I will tell you, and I will not make it sound better than it was. It was February. It was gray. It rained the kind of rain that does not fall so much as hang in the air. And I had been alone for 11 days without speaking a full sentence to another human being. I opened my laptop. I typed the Philippines into the search, because a man from my old regiment had gone to Cebu and posted photographs that looked like another planet. And one thing led to another, the way it does, and I made a profile on a site called Filipino Cupid. Here is my confession, the one I have to make before I tell you anything else. Because if I do not, I am no better than the men I will criticize later. I lied on that profile. Not enormously, but I lied. The photograph I used was 7 years old. More hair, less weight, a man on a beach in Corsica squinting into a sun that made him look 10 years younger than he was. I wrote that I was 48. I was 50. And when it asked about my situation, I wrote it in a way that made my money sound tidier and larger and more settled than the frightened lump sum it actually was. I built a small fiction of myself, and I put it online like bait, so when people ask me, later, how I feel about the deceptions I would eventually meet, I have to be honest. I threw the first hook. I catfished, if that is the word the young people use, before anyone catfished me. A man in a glass house should be careful where he aims. And she responded. A woman in Dumaguete, on the island of Negros, in the part they call the Visayas. Her name was Rowena. In her first message, she did not gush. She did not call me handsome. She did not ask me for anything. She asked me why a Frenchman would want to talk to a pharmacy assistant from a small city she was fairly sure I could not find on a map. It was a good question. It was a soldier's question, almost. I liked her immediately. And being a man who distrusts things he likes immediately, that worried me. I want to be careful here, because this is the part where most of these stories go wrong. And I know it. And you know it. Man alone. Money in the bank. Warm voice on a screen. It writes itself. I had read the horror stories. I had read dozens of them, sitting in that too-quiet flat. And I told myself I was different, because I had read them. Which, of course, is exactly what every one of those men told himself too. So I made myself a rule that first week. Before I had feelings I would have to argue with. I wrote it on a card and I put it by the laptop, like an order pinned to a board. The rule was this. Treat this as an operation. Reconnoiter before you commit. Never send money to a face on a screen. Never buy land you cannot own. And meet the family before you believe a single word about family. 4 lines. I did not know yet how hard I would fight myself to keep them. I know what a card by a laptop sounds like. It sounds like a man playing soldier with his own loneliness, and maybe it was. But the card was not really about her. I did not know her yet. The card was a message from the version of me that was calm, the 7 in the morning version, cold coffee, clear head, to the version of me I knew was coming, the one at 11 at night after a bottle of Côte du Rhône, who would want to believe anything a warm voice told him. In the army, you write the order when you are rested, so it can be obeyed when you are exhausted and afraid. That is all the card was. One clear-headed man leaving instructions for the frightened one who would show up later. And he did show up. He showed up more than once. That was the beginning. A gray February, a false photograph, and a good question from a stranger. Everything I did right after that, I did on purpose. Everything I nearly did wrong, I nearly did for the oldest reason there is. We talked for 4 months before I booked a single flight, and I want to tell you exactly how those 4 months went, because this is where I did the first thing right, and it is the thing almost nobody does. I did not send her money, not 1 peso, and she did not ask. But that is not the point, because the men who lose everything will tell you their woman did not ask either, at first. The point is that I decided, before there was any warmth between us, that the answer to any request in those early months would be no, automatically, the way a sentry challenges everyone, including his own officer. It is not about trust. It is about not letting the question even begin. We used Messenger for the video calls. Every few days at first, then most days, always at a time that worked for both of us. She was 6 hours ahead, so my evening was her middle of the night, and I noticed she took the calls anyway, tired, in a plain room with a fan turning behind her and a child's school bag on a chair in the corner. She had a daughter, Kimberly, 9 years old, from a relationship that had ended before the girl could walk. Rowena told me this on the second call, unprompted, almost like she wanted to get the disqualifying facts out of the way early so I could leave now if I was going to. I did the opposite of leaving. I started paying attention properly, the way I would to terrain. The calls settled into a shape. She would come home from her shift at the pharmacy, still in the polo shirt with the Mercury Drug logo, and prop the phone against something on the kitchen table. And we would talk while she cooked, or while Kimberly did homework in the background and occasionally shoved her face into the frame to inspect the foreigner. There was always a fan turning. There was always, somewhere in the house or the next house, a karaoke machine murdering a love song from the 80s, because in that country there is always, everywhere, someone singing, badly and with total sincerity, into a microphone. I came to find it comforting, the singing. It meant the picture was live. You cannot fake a neighbor's off-key air supply. And I want to be fair to myself here, because I have made myself sound like a machine running checks, and that is only half of it. The other half is that I laughed on those calls in a way I had not laughed in years. She was funny, dry, a little wicked, quick to catch me being pompous. And a former soldier explaining anything to anybody can get very pompous. When I started lecturing her once about the correct way to make a proper cassoulet, she waited until I finished, and then asked very politely whether in France we also had the concept of a woman who is tired and just wants a sandwich. I deserved that. I still think about it. Here is what a soldier notices that a lonely man does not. I noticed that her story did not change. I have interrogated men. Gently, it is mostly listening. And the thing about an invented story is that it drifts. The details move by a few degrees each time until the map no longer matches the ground. Rowena's did not drift. The pharmacy where she worked, a Mercury Drug branch near the Robinsons Mall in Dumaguete, was the same pharmacy in March as it was in June. Her mother's illness, the mother had diabetes, badly, the way half the province seems to, was described the same way each time, without escalation, without a sudden hospital drama that needed 40,000 pesos by Friday. When I asked a question that a scammer would deflect, she answered it, and sometimes the answer was unflattering. Her ex was not a monster in her telling. He was just a boy who was also poor and also frightened and left. That kind of honesty is very hard to fake, because faking it requires the thing the fakers do not have, which is a real memory. But, and I say this because I promised you the whole truth, I was also, quietly, doing something less romantic. I was verifying. In the French army, you do not brief a plan on a source you have not checked. So while I was falling for her voice, another part of me, the cold part, was building a file. I found the Mercury drug branch on the map and confirmed it existed and matched what she described. I asked casually, over weeks, for the kind of small verifiable facts a liar cannot keep straight. The name of Kimberly's school, the fiesta in her barangay, and what month it fell, the cost of a kilo of rice that week, the jeepney fare into the center. All of it checked. And the big one, the one every man over there should do, and almost none of them do. I needed to know she was not already married. Because you cannot divorce in this country. There is no divorce. There is only annulment, which costs 300 to 800,000 pesos and takes years. And half the beautiful stories you hear end on the rock of a husband nobody mentioned. So I asked her directly, was she ever married? And she said, no, only the boyfriend. Never married. And then I did what a soldier does with a verbal report. I did not simply believe it. Months later, on the ground, I would pay a small fee and pull the document they call a senomar, a certificate from the government that says, in writing, this person has no marriage on record. It came back clean. Never married. It cost me almost nothing, and it was the best money I spent in this entire story. I know how this sounds. I know it sounds cold to run a background check on a woman while telling her good night. But listen to me, because this is the whole lesson in one sentence. The men who get destroyed are not the ones who loved too little. They are the ones who verified too little. You can love her with your whole chest and still check the document. The two are not enemies. Anyone who tells you that checking is an insult to love is either naive or is counting on your shame to stop you checking. By June, I had a file that said she was real, and a feeling that said she was more than real. And those two things pointing the same direction is a rare alignment. So I booked a flight, not to move, to reconnoiter. 3 weeks, a hotel of my own on Rizal Boulevard, my own money, my own exit already booked. You never advance without knowing the way back. I did not tell her I was coming until it was booked either. Another old habit. You do not announce a movement before the transport is confirmed, because a plan spoken aloud too early is just a wish that can be used against you. When I told her the dates, she went quiet, and then she said, in a smaller voice than she used for jokes, that she was frightened I would come all this way and find her ordinary. I told her ordinary was what I was hoping for. Extraordinary is what the scammers sell. I have learned to distrust extraordinary. The flight into Dumaguete comes down over water so blue it looks like a mistake, onto a little strip at Sibulan with the sea on one side and the volcano behind. The heat hits you at the door of the aircraft like a wall you did not see. 34 degrees, and the air so wet you wear it, and it does not let go of you again for 3 weeks. I stood on the tarmac in a shirt already soaked through, my knees not quite believing the 20 hours of aircraft behind them, and I thought calmly, this is the ground now. Stop imagining it and start reading it. There is a discipline to arriving somewhere you have only ever seen through a screen. The screen has no smell. The screen does not have diesel and salt, and someone frying garlic and, underneath all of it, the green rotten bloom smell of the tropics that tells your body, before your mind agrees, that you are very far from Grenoble. She was behind the barrier, shorter than I had built her in my mind, which is how you know a face is real and not a photograph. And here is the moment I have to hand back my own confession, because when she saw me, she stopped for half a second. Just half a second. I was 50, not 48. I had less hair than the man on the beach in Corsica, and more of me around the middle. The photograph had lied, and now the photograph had to stand in an airport and be a real man. She saw all of it, and then she laughed, not cruelly, a small laugh at both of us, and said, "You also are older than your picture." And I said, "Yes, and so are you." And neither of us was, in fact, surprised, because we had both done the same small, vain thing. We were, how do you say, quits. Two people who had each shaved a few years and softened a few facts, meeting in the heat even. That laugh told me more than the cinema did. A person running a scheme does not laugh at being caught in a small lie on the first minute. They double down. She just found it funny that we were both a little bit frauds, and honestly, so did I. I want to be careful not to make the first 3 weeks sound like a holiday, because that is the trap, and I nearly walked into it with my eyes open. Everything in those weeks is designed by the climate and the newness to feel like paradise, and paradise is precisely when a disciplined man stops being disciplined. So I kept the card in my head. Reconnoiter. Do not commit. And I watched the ground the way I was trained to, even while I was happier than I had been in a decade. Dumaguete is a small city, and it is easy to love, and that is a hazard, not a feature. They call it the City of Gentle People. Silliman University runs through the middle of it, an old American Protestant school with acacia trees and stone buildings that look like they were lifted out of a different century. So there are students everywhere, and bookshops, and a certain calm you do not get in the roar of Cebu or Manila. There is a boulevard by the sea, Rizal Boulevard, where in the evening the whole town walks slowly up and down and eats grilled things on sticks from the tempurahan carts, and drinks halo out of tall plastic cups, and watches the ferries slide across to Siquijor. There is a bakery that has made the same cake, a thing called Sans Rival, layers of cashew and butter and meringue that has no business being that good since before I was born. On my third evening, Rowena walked me the length of that boulevard and did not once steer me toward a shop, or a jeweler, or a sad relative who happened to need something. She bought the grilled squid. She paid for it herself, 150 pesos, before I could reach my wallet, and something in me relaxed a notch that had been tight for a decade. I made myself notice the small economics of everything, because a man who does not learn the price of ordinary things is a man who will be robbed at the price of extraordinary ones. A tricycle across town, 30 pesos, half a euro. A bottle of San Miguel at a little place off the boulevard, 60 pesos. A good meal of grilled bangus and rice and a mango, under 200. And a foreigner's price for the same things, if he is lazy or in love and stops checking, 2 or 3 times that, cheerfully charged. No malice in it, just the ancient arithmetic of the world. The Kano has money, the Kano will pay. I learned the real prices in the first week the way I would learn a patrol route, so that later, when it mattered, I would know the exact shape of a number that was too big. I also watched how she was with money when she thought I was not weighing it, and that told me more than any document. She counted her change. She turned off the light when she left a room. She scolded Kimberly, gently, for leaving the fan running in an empty bedroom because electricity in the Visayas is dear, and she knew it to the peso. This is not the behavior of someone who has decided a rich foreigner will make counting unnecessary. This is the behavior of someone who has been poor carefully, which is a skill and an honest one, and I respect it more than almost anything. But I did not let the notch stay relaxed, because now came the part of the operation that matters more than the boulevard, more than the cake, more than the way she held my arm. Now I had to meet the family, on their ground, because everything I had read told me that the family is where the real story is, and the family is where the money goes, and a woman can be entirely genuine, and her family can still be a slow, warm, smiling machine for turning a foreigner into a monthly wage. I had to go to Valencia, up in the hills, and sit in their house and read the terrain that no video call would ever show me. Rowena's family lived in Valencia, a barangay up in the hills above the city, where the air is a few degrees kinder, and the roosters start their business at 4 in the morning, whether you have agreed to it or not. You take a tricycle up, the little motorcycle with the sidecar welded on, and the driver leans the whole thing into the curves, and you hold your breath, and the jungle gets greener the higher you go. Their house was concrete block and unpainted, a bahay na bato that had run out of money halfway up, with rebar sticking out of the top of the walls where a second floor was meant to go someday and never had. A basketball hoop nailed to a coconut tree, a sari-sari store run out of the front window, selling single cigarettes and sachets of shampoo and warm Coke. This is not poverty as a Frenchman pictures it. It is a working, cheerful, crowded kind of not enough. I want to describe that first lunch honestly, because it is where the whole thing could have gone the ordinary way, and I felt it trying to. They fed me like a returning general. There was lechon, a small pig, roasted, which for a family like this is not a Tuesday. It is a statement. It is a month of the store's profit laid on a table to honor a guest. There was pancit, the long noodles that mean long life, and mounds of rice, and a whole fish, and Coke in glass bottles that someone had run down the hill to buy cold. And Rowena's mother, the diabetic one, moving slowly, but running the whole room from her chair like a colonel who no longer needs to stand to be obeyed. The father was quiet and shook my hand like a man measuring the width of my shoulders and the state of my boots. I knew that handshake. I had used it. It is the handshake of a man deciding whether you can be relied on when things are bad. The brothers, there were 2 in their 20s, were friendly in a way I have learned to watch, the way that arrives already knowing you are important, already laughing a little too readily at things that were not quite jokes. I want to be careful, because it is easy, telling this later, to make the brothers into villains, and they were not villains. They were 2 young men in a place with no work worth the name, watching their sister bring home a foreigner with a French pension, and doing exactly what I would have done in their sandals, which is to hope, out loud, that the tide had finally turned. There was no cunning in it. That is the part the angry videos get wrong. It was not a trap laid by clever people. It was hope. And hope in a poor place has a gravity to it. And gravity does not need to be cunning to pull you down. And then, gently, over the second plate, it began. Not a demand. Never a demand. That is the mistake foreigners expect. The crude hand out. It is softer than that, and far stronger. The mother spoke, and Rowena translated, though I was already picking up that the words for family and for debt of gratitude, utang na loob, came up together like they were welded. She spoke about the second floor that was never finished, about how, if Rowena married a good man, a serious man, The family could finally be, the word she used, through Rowena, was secure. She said God had a plan, and perhaps I was part of it. She was not lying. That is the thing I need you to understand. She meant every word. In her world, a daughter's foreign husband is not a son-in-law. He is an answered prayer, a bridge out of not enough for everyone standing behind her. It is not a scam. It is a completely sincere expectation, which is far harder to say no to than a scam. And then one of the brothers, the older one, mentioned the land, very casually, passing the rice. They had land, he said, a good lot, 1/2 hectare, down toward the coast, near a barangay I won't name. The family had held it for 2 generations, and a man like me, a serious man, a man with resources. The sensible thing, everyone knew, was to build the house there, on family land, for me and Rowena and Kimberly. 2.5 million pesos would put up a real house, concrete, 2 stories, tiled, the kind of house that would make the whole clan the envy of the barangay. About 40,000 euros. And the land itself would cost me nothing, he said, smiling, because it was already theirs, already family. I want you to feel how good that offer sounds when you are sitting in that chair. You are full of roast pig these people cannot afford. The woman you have fallen for is beside you. A child who has started calling you Tito, uncle, is playing on the floor. And they are offering you a home, on land that costs you nothing, in a country where you have just learned you can never own land anyway. It is not greed talking. It is love and belonging and a future, all wrapped around a financial arrangement that would strip me naked. And I nearly said yes at that table. I felt the word forming. 40,000 euros. I had it. I could see the house. And then the soldier woke up. Here is what the soldier knew, and what I made myself say out loud that night, alone, in the hotel on the boulevard, counting it on my fingers like rations. A foreigner cannot own land in the Philippines. It is in their constitution, and it is not negotiable, and there is no clever lawyer who makes it not true. So, if I put 2.5 million pesos into a house, that house sits on land that belongs to her brothers. Not to Rowena, to the family lot, in the family name. If Rowena and I go well, fine. If Rowena and I go badly, if she dies, if we fight, if the mother decides one day that I am not, after all, part of God's plan, I own a pile of concrete I cannot take, cannot sell, cannot stand on without their permission. I would have spent 40,000 euros to become a permanent guest on someone else's ground. I would have handed my exit to the very people who have the most reason, someday, to close it. I did not say any of this at the table. You do not correct a family in their own house over lunch. You would shame them, and shame in this culture does not clear the air. It drives the problem underground where it festers. I smiled. I said it was a generous idea, and a serious one, and that a serious man would need to think about it properly. Which was true. And then I went back to my hotel, and I did not sleep, because half of me was still at that table, still seeing the house, still wanting to be the answered prayer, wanting it badly. That is the close call I came closest to failing. Not a scam. A dinner. The next morning, I did the coldest, most useful thing I did in the whole affair. I found a lawyer in Dumaguete, a real one, a woman with gray hair, and a small office near the Hall of Justice, 5,000 pesos for a consultation, about 80 euros. And I sat down and I said, "Tell me every way a foreigner loses his money here. Not the brochure, the morgue." And she laughed, not unkindly, the laugh of someone who has watched this film many times and knows how it ends. And then she told me for 2 hours, and I filled a notebook. She told me about the men who build the dream house on the girlfriend's family land, and then discover, when the girlfriend's brother inherits the lot, that they own a beautiful building on ground they can be told to leave. She told me about the ones who put the whole property in the wife's sole name, because they were told a foreigner has no choice, which is a lie about houses, though true about bare land, and then lost all of it in a separation that, remember, cannot even legally become a divorce. She told me about the company structures, the arrangements where a foreigner holds 40% and Filipino nominees hold the rest, and how those nominees have a way of remembering, when the money is in, that on paper the thing is theirs. Every story ended the same way. A man who confused the warmth of the people with the coldness of the law and paid for the confusion with everything he had. I flew home to France, with the family's offer still warm in my pocket, and a decision already hardening in my chest that I would not build one brick on that land, no matter how much I loved the woman it came with, because you do not put your only exit in another man's hand. Not the army's first rule, but close. Back in France, in the gray again, I laid the whole operation out on my kitchen table the way I used to lay out a movement order, and I made the decisions that this entire video exists to give to you, because if you take nothing else, take these. Decision 1. I would not build on family land. I told Rowena on a video call, and I told her plainly, and I braced for it to end the relationship, because if the relationship only survived my 40,000 euros, then it was better to know now. She was quiet. Then she said something I did not expect. She said, I told them you would say no. She said, I did not want the house there either. She said, if it is your money, it should be your name. Diba? Isn't it? And that was the moment, if you want the moment, that I stopped being a lonely man taking a risk and started being a man building something with a partner who could count as well as I could. Decision 2. If I bought anything, I would buy the one thing the law actually lets a foreigner own outright. A condominium. It is the single exception. A foreigner cannot own land or a house on land, but a foreigner can own a unit in a condominium building, in his own name, on a real title, as long as the whole building stays under 40% foreign-owned. That is the law, and it is solid, and it is written for exactly a man like me. So when I flew back, my second trip, 3 more weeks, my own hotel again, I did not look at houses. I looked at condominiums, with the lawyer's checklist in my hand. There was a temptation even here, and I will name it, because the condominium was not a magic word that switched off all the risk. The first unit I liked was cheaper, 2.2 million pesos, about 35,000 euros, and it was cheaper because it was in a building that was still, as they say, pre-selling, meaning it did not fully exist yet, meaning I would be handing over real money for a floor that was, at that moment, a drawing and a promise and a show flat with a plastic orchid on the counter. The salesgirl was lovely, and the brochure was beautiful, and the price was good. And half the foreigners who lose money in this country lose it exactly there, on a building that is finished 2 years late or never, in a country where suing a developer is a way to grow old. I walked away from the cheaper one. Pay for what exists. Never pay for the drawing. I found the right one on the third trip. A 2-bedroom unit in a mid-rise building that was finished, occupied, alive. Real families in the corridors. A working lift. A guard at a desk who actually knew who lived there. A few streets back from the boulevard, close enough to walk to the sea, high enough to catch the wind so the heat was bearable without the air conditioning eating my pension. 2.8 million pesos. about 45,000 euros. And I did not hand over 1 centavo until the lawyer had done the things the lonely men never do. She pulled the mother title of the building and confirmed it was clean. No liens, real land underneath owned properly by the developer. She confirmed the foreign quota in writing. The building was well under 40% foreign, so my ownership was legal and safe, and there would be no ugly surprise where the sale is void, because the last available foreign slot was already taken. She checked the developer had actually delivered, that the association was real, and its accounts were not a disaster, that there were no unpaid dues waiting to become my problem. Only when every box was ticked did I transfer the money into my own name onto a condominium certificate of title with the word Michel on it, that I can sell, rent, leave in a will, or walk away from, and that no brother, no mother, no future argument can take from me. There were costs around it, and I count them for you honestly, because the men who tell you the sticker price are lying by omission. Transfer taxes, the documentary stamps, the title registration, the lawyer. Call it another 220,000 pesos, 3,500 euros, on top. Furnishing it, a bed, a real refrigerator, a stove, a small sofa, the 10,000 things an empty box needs before it is a home. 320,000 pesos, a little over 5,000 euros. So the whole operation, the roof over my head, that is actually mine, came to about 3.3 million pesos, a little over 50,000 euros, all in. And here is the discipline that this whole channel is about. I had 155,000 euros when I started. I spent about 50 of it on a condominium in my own name. I kept the rest, around 90,000 euros, in France, in euros, in my own accounts, in my own country, untouched, where no amount of love or lunch or roasted pig can reach it. My pension still lands in a French account every month, and I move only what I need. If it all goes wrong tomorrow, I lose the price of a small flat, and I keep my life. That is not cynicism. That is how you love someone without handing them the keys to your ruin. We married the next year, quietly. A civil ceremony at the municipal hall, Kimberly holding the flowers, Rowena's mother crying in the good way. A lunch after that cost 250,000 pesos, 4,000 euros, and was worth everyone. No grand church, no 3-day fiesta I would be expected to fund for 200 people. A wedding sized to a marriage, not to a village's expectations. Rowena wanted it that way too. I keep telling you that, and I keep meaning it. So you are sitting there thinking, this is a happy ending. Why is your video called Do Not Move Here? Let me tell you why. Let me tell you what 2026 actually costs, and what nearly went wrong even for a man who did everything right. Because that is the reckoning, and it is not romantic at all. The reckoning, for me, was not a woman crying or a scheme unmasked. I keep waiting to give you that scene, the one you came for, and I do not have it. And I am sorry, and I am not sorry. My reckoning was arithmetic. It was the slow arrival of the real bill for this life, the one the beautiful videos never show you. And it is why I am telling every man watching not to do this in 2026 unless he does it my way. Start with the money, because everything starts with the money. When I first spoke to Rowena, 1,000 pesos was about 16 euros. It still is, roughly. But everything those pesos buy has climbed. The province is not cheap anymore, whatever the 10-year-old blog posts tell you. Rice went up. Electricity in the Visayas is some of the most expensive in the country, and the air conditioning a fat European needs is not optional in that heat. My power bill in the hot months runs 9,000 pesos, near 150 euros, in a country where people earn that in a fortnight. The condominium association dues, the security, the lift, the water, another 3,500 pesos a month I did not fully account for at the start. Everything is a little more than the brochure. Everything. Then the visas. And this is where 2026 bites. So listen. I came in as a tourist, and you can extend a tourist stay a long way. But it is a treadmill of fees now. Every extension a queue at the Bureau of Immigration. Every year a little dearer and a little slower and a little more paperwork than the year before. You pay for the extension, and then a fee for the card, and then a fee for the express lane so you do not lose the entire day, and then the annual reporting that every foreigner now does, and each piece is small and reasonable, and together they are a slow drip that never stops. I kept a folder. I always keep a folder. Men who do not keep the folder are the men you find in the immigration office at 9 in the morning with panic in their eyes because a paper they never knew existed has expired. Because I married a Filipina, I could apply for the 13AA, the marriage visa, and I did. And even that, the proper legal route, the correct one, the one you are supposed to want, cost lawyers' fees and months of documents. An interview where a serious woman across a desk asked me serious questions about how we met. A stack of papers as thick as my wrist, all of it stamped and certified and translated and stamped again. And I will be honest with you, sitting in that interview, a decorated soldier of 51 being asked to prove his marriage was real to a clerk, with the power to say no, I felt something I had not felt since I was a private. I felt small and at the mercy of a system and entirely without rank. That feeling is the true price of admission here, and no one puts it in the brochure. There is no easy status in this country. Anyone who tells you that you can just retire in paradise on a whim has not stood in that queue in the heat with a number in his hand watching the afternoon disappear. Then, the thing nobody films. Health care. Rowena's mother, the diabetic one, had a bad turn last year, an infection in the foot, that in France would be a routine admission, and here became a decision about money. A private hospital wanted a deposit before they would properly treat her. That is how it works. You pay to enter. And it came to nearly 180,000 pesos before it was done, close to 3,000 euros. And this is where every rule I made met the reality of loving people, because of course I paid it. I chose to, not because utang na loob trapped me, but because it was Rowena's mother and I had money and she was suffering. The difference, and it is the whole difference, is that I paid it as a decision I made, from a position of strength, out of a fund I had ring-fenced for exactly such things, not because a machine had been slowly closing around me for 2 years until I had no choice. Boundaries are not about never giving. They are about giving as a free man instead of a cornered one. I set the family support at 10,000 pesos a month, about 160 euros. Enough to matter there, small enough that it will never bleed me. I said it once, clearly, at the start, and I have never moved it. And because I never moved it, the requests to move it stopped. That is the secret nobody wants to hear. The boundary that holds is the one you set before you love them, and enforce when it is hard. And the hard time comes, I promise you. And when it came, the older brother, a business idea, a motorcycle, a cousin's tuition, I said no, and it cost me a cold week. And then it was over, because a boundary tested and held is a boundary respected. A boundary that bends, once bends forever. I met those men, by the way. That is another thing 2026 has plenty of. Go to any bar along the boulevard, or the ones on the coast road, and by the second San Miguel you will meet them. The bitter expat, 65, 70, nursing a beer and a grievance, telling you the same story every one of them tells. how she took everything, how they are all the same, how this country is a graveyard for good men. And I would sit and listen, and I would think, my friend, I have read your file before you opened your mouth. You sent money to a face. You built on the land. You put it in her name because a man on a stool exactly like this one told you it was fine. Your grievance is real, and your pain is real, and I am sorry for you. And also, every door you are cursing, you opened yourself. The bitterness is a kind of hiding. It is easier to have been robbed by a wicked woman than to admit you skipped the reconnaissance because you did not want to know. And there is the opposite man in the same bar. And I looked for him on purpose, because you should always find the people who did the thing well and buy them a drink. The quiet ones. Married 15 years, grandchildren, a modest condo, a boundary set so long ago nobody tests it anymore. They do not talk much, because a life that is working is not a story. But they will tell you, if you ask the right way, that they did more or less exactly what I did, and that the ones crying into their beer 3 tables over did more or less exactly what I refused to. The two futures are both there, in the same room, drinking the same beer. The only variable is discipline. So why do I say do not move here in 2026? Because I look at the men who arrive now, and I see them making every choice I nearly made. I see them building the house on the family land because it feels like love. I see them putting the property in her name because a stranger at the bar told them it was fine. I see them sending money to a face before they have booked a flight. I see them arriving with a pension that was comfortable in 2015 and is thin in 2026, into a country that has quietly got more expensive while they were dreaming about it. The paradise in the videos is a real place, but it is a real place with a real price, and the price has gone up, and the traps have not moved an inch. I made it work. I want to be clear about that because I do not want to sit here pretending I am unhappy. I have a home that is mine, on a title with my name on it. I have a wife who told her own family no before I ever had to. I have a stepdaughter who does her homework at my table and beat me at chess last Sunday. Beat me honestly, I checked. And who is not, I think, going to grow up in not enough. I kept 90,000 euros and my dignity and my exit, all three, and I am, for the first time since the uniform came off, not nothing. And I will tell you the strangest part. The part one did not plan for and could not have counted in advance. The discipline that saved my money is also the thing that made the marriage good. Because I never made Rowena the guardian of my finances, she never had to become one. Because I set the family support once and held it, her family stopped seeing me as a wallet and slowly, over 2 years, started seeing me as a man. A stiff, foreign, cassoulet lecturing man, but a man. The boundaries I built to protect myself turned out to protect us. A wife who knows exactly where the line is does not spend her life pushing against it. There is a peace in a clear border that no amount of generous chaos ever gives you. I learned that on a base a long time ago, and I did not expect to prove it again at a kitchen table in Negros. Some mornings I stand on the little balcony of that condominium with a coffee. A good coffee this time, hot, and someone downhill is already singing, and a rooster who cannot tell time is at it, and the ferries are crossing to Siquijor. And I think about the 7 in the morning man in the kitchen near Lyon, weightless, needed by no one. He would not believe this. He would not believe he got here without being destroyed on the way. And the only thing I could tell him, if I could reach back, is the same thing I am telling you. But I made it work, because I treated it like the most important operation of my life instead of the holiday it is disguised as. I reconnoitered. I verified. I checked the document. I read the terrain. I refused the land. I bought the one thing the law let me own. I kept my money in my own country and moved only what I chose to. And even then, even doing all of it right, there were nights I nearly threw it away for a good feeling at a crowded table. Most men will not do what I did. Most men will do what felt good instead. And that is who this warning is for. If you are that man and you are going anyway, and I know some of you are going anyway, then take my 4 lines and pin them where you can see them. Reconnoiter before you commit. Never send money to a face on a screen. Never buy what you cannot legally own. And meet the family, on their ground, before you believe one word about family. Do that, and you might come out the way I did. Ignore it, and this channel will have your story next. That's Michel, 51 years old, a French soldier who counted his way out of the oldest trap there is by refusing to stop counting even when he was in love. You heard him say it himself. His is not a story of ruin, and that is exactly what makes it worth your time, because the men who got out clean have the map, and the map is more useful than the wreckage. Notice what he did not tell you. He did not tell you the Philippines is a scam, or that Filipino families are the enemy, or that love across an ocean is a fool's errand. It isn't. His wife told her own family no. Her mother's prayer was sincere, not a con. The trap was never a villain. It was the gap between a beautiful feeling and a cold set of laws. And Michel survived by respecting both at once. That is the hardest thing a lonely man can do, and most cannot. So if you are standing where he stood, gray window, quiet flat, a warm voice on a screen, take the lesson and not just the longing. Verify. Ring-fence your money. Own only what the law lets you own. And meet the family before you trust the word family. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and whether you'd have refused that house on the land. If this reached you, share it with the man in your life who needs to hear it before he books the flight. Like the video, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care of yourselves out there. This has been Inside the Philippines Journals.